Hello, welcome to the literary and jury charge portion of the 80s class. Today I'm going to start out with an article from the book Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And this selection is called Be Aware of the Snowball Effect of Your Thinking. Okay, ready? A powerful technique for becoming more peaceful is to be aware of how quickly your negative and insecure thinking can spiral out of control. Have you ever noticed how uptight you feel when you're caught up in your thinking? And to top it off, the more absorbed you get in the details of whatever is upsetting you, the worse you feel. One thought leads to another, and yet another, until at some point you become incredibly agitated. For example, you might wake up in the middle of the night and remember a phone call that needs to be made the following day. Then, rather than feeling relieved that you remembered such an important call, you start thinking about everything else you have to do tomorrow. You start rehearsing a probable conversation with your boss, getting yourself even more upset. Pretty soon, you think to yourself, I can't believe how busy I am. I must make 50 phone calls a day. Whose life is this anyway? And on it goes until you're feeling sorry for yourself. For many people, there's no limit to how long this type of thought attack can go on. In fact, I've been told by clients that many of their days and nights are spent in this type of mental rehearsal. Needless to say, it's impossible to feel peaceful with your head full of concerns and annoyances. The solution is to notice what's happening in your head before your thoughts have a chance to build any momentum. The sooner you catch yourself in the act of building your mental snowball, the easier it is to stop. In our example here, you might notice your snowball thinking right when you start running through the list of what you have to do the next day. Then, instead of obsessing on your upcoming day, you say to yourself, wow, there I go again, and consciously nip it in the bud. You stop your train of thought before it has a chance to get going. You can then focus not on how overwhelmed you are, but on how grateful you are for remembering the phone call that needed to be made. If it's the middle of the night, write it down on a piece of paper and go back to sleep. You might even consider keeping a pen and paper by the bed for such moments. You may indeed be a very busy person, but remember that filling your head with thoughts of how overwhelmed you are only exasperates the problem by making you feel even more stressed than you already do. Try this simple little exercise the next time you begin to obsess on your schedule. You will be amazed at how effective it can be. Okay, I'm going to give you some Congressional Record. The subject is the handicapped. Actually, you know what? We're going to put that off. Before we start this, I'm going to give you some Latin and French words. We did this last class. This is a new selection, and then I'm going to give you the paragraph, okay? All right, ready? Latin and French words. I'm going to give you the words first. So we've got ex parte, per se. We've got in vinculo, matrimony. And the last one is post mortem. Okay, all right, here is your paragraph. A vinculo matrimony means from the bonds of marriage or an absolute divorce. A vinculo matrimony is the same as a complete dissolution of the marriage when only one side is present in an action of law. An ex parte proceeding takes place. Ex parte means without opposition. Per se means in, through, by itself, or of itself. Anything that possesses characteristics that are inherently attributed to it and not derived by statute is a crime per se. Post mortem means after death. Post in Latin means after. A post mortem examination of a corpse is conducted to determine the cause of death. Post meridiem means after midday. Postpartum means after childbirth. Okay. Here are your jury instructions. Ready? All parties are present. Both trial counsel are present. The trial jury is present. Mr. Reynolds, the clerk, has the 3 separate questions that were submitted. I might indicate for the jury's information that the Calgic numbers are noted to the left at the top. Now, in connection with the question, clarification of instructions, in drawing conclusions from circumstantial evidence, the instructions talk of drawing up the reasonable interpretations. The question is, reasonable by whose standards? This refers to Calgic 3.92 for your information. In response to your first question, reasonable by whose standards, the court's answer is as follows. Reasonableness is judged by the jury's standard and not reasonable as judged by any particular segment of society. My comments at the conclusion of answering some of the following questions may shed some light on what I have just said. I also should add that this is to be considered by the jury as an academic discussion regarding these words and their meaning as used in the instructions. The next series of questions refers principally to Calgic 3.92 and may have application to 3.93. But I took your question to be applied principally to Calgic 3.92. The statement is, if 2 issues are reasonable, rational, but one is more reasonable, rational, the question is, are we to treat them as equally reasonable, rational? The words reasonable and rational are interchangeable as used in this instruction. The instruction turns on reasonable interpretation versus rational interpretation, or reasonable interpretation versus unreasonable interpretation. So the answer to your first question, are we to treat them as equally reasonable, rational? I will indicate as follows. Factually reasonable interpretations may not be of equal strength, but are equal in the eyes of the law and are so treated in the instruction. This is because the law does not attempt to measure the strength of a reasonable interpretation. So the answer to your first question is yes. The second question, continuing on, or can we judge that the more reasonable one is reasonable and the less reasonable one is unreasonable? The answer to that question is no. These questions are answered because the question refers to two reasonable, rational interpretations. That is why I attempted to point out the difference in the issues that are presented. The next question submitted appears to apply principally to CalJIC 3.93. And just if you were wondering, CalJIC simply means California Jury Instructions. Okay. I'm going to finish up this article that we started in the last class. This is Jennifer Hudson's story. Okay, here we go. So many of the prayers I said as a girl were sung, and they still are. Our family was full of musicians. My Uncle John was one of the lead musicians at church and directed the choir. My cousin Quentin could sit down at the piano and play any song ever written. We'd sing one of my grandmother's favorite hymns, like How Great Thou Art, or a gospel tune like Be Grateful. The words filled my spirit as much as the music did. Be grateful. Oh yeah, my God said He'd never, never forsake you. Be grateful in everything, at all times, like it says in the Bible, like I heard in church. We marked up our Bibles, underlining key verses. We'd take them out and study them when the preacher preached. You'd find one of my mother's carefully folded programs stuck between the leaves, or an inspiration inside for an anniversary, a birthday, or a graduation. That was a Hudson family tradition. If you were celebrating a big milestone or heading off somewhere, you were given a Bible. My grandmother gave my uncle a Bible before he left to serve in Vietnam. When I went away to college, my mother gave me my own Bible. It's small, black, and the cover is worn to pieces. But you know the saying, the Bible that's falling apart belongs to someone who isn't. I had it with me when I was on American Idol, and I'd pull it out of my purse whenever I needed inspiration or guidance. Sometimes the other contestants would tease me about it. Jennifer, you wouldn't cross the street without your Bible, they'd say. They were right. These days there are Bible apps that make it easy to look up a verse. I use them to read something to David Jr., or we play a Bible game on his iPad. But I still carry that little Bible my mother gave me everywhere. It's a reminder of how my faith has carried me, always. Okay, there's more to this story, but we will conclude our class for today. So this concludes the literary and jury charge of the 80 class, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.